Milling wood is the act of taking thin slices off of your surface to get it down to the thickness that you need for your project. A lot of people will just go straight to the planer for their milling process. The planer has a bed at the bottom that holds your board in compression and will take slices off of the top as it's running through. Now when it does this, whatever is going on the bottom of your piece will translate to the top of the piece because it's holding it in compression. So the issue with this is that if you already have a wonky board and you run it through the planer, whatever's happening on the bottom of that wonkiness is not going to go away. It's just going to translate to the top and make your board even worse. The proper thing to do would be to run it through a joiner first. The joiner acts with a cutter on the bottom. It leaves the top part of your board completely free. As you pass the board along the bed of the joiner, it will take cuts from below. It is not in compression and you'll end up with a nice flat edge that you can then take and run the opposite side through your planer. The basic workings of a joiner is you have your safety guard here that retracts as you're pushing the wood through, and you feed wood through on this side of the joiners. Your safety guard will move with the joiner as the wood's passing through and keep your limbs hopefully away from where the blades are. So the blades are here underneath the joiner, and this cutter head will spin around actually in that direction towards you, towards the camera, and it takes little bites away from the wood as you're pushing it through. The other thing you have here is your back plate, and your back plate can be adjusted. There's some levers on the back of it to adjust the depth as well as adjust the, let's get this loose, the angle. So you can go ahead and set this up to cut angled or beveled pieces if you would like to do that. This back bed has a small lever on the bottom of it that allows you to raise and lower the height of the bed, and this is going to be what determines how much of a cut you're taking off of your piece of lumber as you're milling. You never really want to take more than 1/16 of an inch at a time. Anything larger would be too heavy of a cut and can really damage your machine and injure you while you're making the cut. Before you get going and making your cuts, you want to make sure that your fence is in the adequate position. You'll need to check two things. You'll need to check your depth to make sure that you're going to be able to make a full cut on your piece. And because I am cutting these 6-inch wide pieces, it's going to basically take the most of my bed. So I'm going to make sure I back up my fence all the way to the back end. You should be where your blade is meeting. So you don't want this fence all the way back away from your blade, or you're going to end up with a weird step cut on your piece of lumber. So always make sure that your fence at least just kisses where that blade is going to start. And then the next thing you want to do is adjust the back for the angle that you want. And I want some pretty square stock lumber, so I'm going to make sure that I have this set to a good 90 degrees. And once I have both of those things set to where I want them, I will tighten my levers back here. Levers, 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 don't know. There's things holding it on. This might take some doing. You can, take off your guard if you need to while you're messing around with it. I'm putting my square up against the fence and making sure that I don't see any gaps of air running through so that I know it's a good fit at that 90 degrees. Now before you run your wood through, you want to inspect it for any nails, any staples and things like that, and you can take a wire brush, run it over the piece just to get rid of any debris, any rocks or things that might have picked up in the process, because you don't want those to end up chipping away at your blades. You want to prolong the life of your knives as long as possible. You want to make sure that you're cutting the wood in the right direction. Take your hand and very gently run it across the wood and figure out which way the grain is going. And there's something that they say, pet the kitty. And just like if you were petting your cat or your dog, if you were to run your hand up the back end of them, it would be not a very smooth transition. Stroking them in the right direction, it keeps all of their fur down. Well, it's the same thing when you're checking the grain of your wood. So you want to make sure that you're cutting in the right direction, and the reason why is that the blade's going to pick up on those transitions. So if you're running against the wrong direction, the same thing that happens with your pet, when you're petting them in the wrong direction, it's going to get all messed up. Well, your board's going to get all jacked up. The grain's not going to look right. So you want the grain to be in the direction that facing down. So if my grain is running in this way, I want that to be the way I put it on the joiner as I'm passing it through. To make a safe cut on the joiner, you always want to keep your hands away from where the guard is. When I go to make this cut, I'm going to be feeding this through this way And as my hand gets close to that blade, I'm going to be moving it back. And at the same time, I'm going to be, with my back hand, supporting the board as I'm pushing through. And every time I get close to that, I'm just moving my hands just a little bit as I push, 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 until I get enough past the blade where I can then reach over and hold it here as I continue the cut. I always want to make sure that I never keep my hands on the board as it's passing over the blade. By doing that, it keeps me away from any of the danger zones that might happen. Your joiner and planer will also come with push sticks. You can read up about how best to use them. Sometimes I think adding an extra element can make your cut even more risky. So I tend to only use them sparingly when I absolutely have to and when I'm milling very small bits of wood. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate some cuts for you. Before using any woodworking machine, I always like to turn it on and off really quickly because most electrical issues a machine would have are going to reveal themselves within that first turn on. There are a couple of safety rules that you want to make sure you always follow when working with machinery. Never wear any loose or dangling things, so every time you see me working on the machines, chances are you're not hearing me with the microphone. I don't want any wires around me, anything that can endanger my working with the machines. So nothing dangling, no loose chains. Make sure your clothing is not baggy, anything that could get caught in the machines. You also do not want to wear gloves. You don't want the chance of your glove or your hand getting stuck into a saw. And always wear your proper safety gear, whether it is ear protection, eye protection, mask, depending on what you're working with. You know, cedar and I have a love-hate relationship. I love cedar, it hates me. So there are things that you want to think about. I break out in hives whenever I'm using it. Wearing a mask and things like that can just help reduce that. Always work in a well-ventilated area. I have an open garage. When I'm milling and things, I wheel my machines out to the closest edge of the garage so that I can mill in primarily fresh air. And always, always, always read the safety instructions that come with whatever machinery you are going to operate. Never take on more than you feel comfortable with. If you don't feel comfortable operating that machine, do not operate that machine until you've learned the proper safety use of that machine. If I forget anything else, I'll pop it on the screen here. Now your planer is a little bit easier to understand than the joiner. There's a lot less parts that you need to deal with. The cutter head is going to be mounted up here inside where the motor is, and then you have a lever that will raise and lower. In my case, it's going to raise and lower the whole motor head, and that will change the thickness. It's the same case, making sure you understand the direction of the grain. It's going to be even more important while the planer. It's going to pinch your board as it's running through, and you want to make sure that you don't have a lot of tear out. Tear out is when you have these big chunks and chips being taken off of your wood, and that happens because you fed it through in the wrong direction of your grain. Keep your fingers away from that part, and then here's the raise and lower. You still want to stick to that 16th inch rule of milling. Don't take more than a 16th inch. And then I still always run my basic safety things where I start the machine for 3 seconds, turn it off. Any mechanical issues that you might have or come across, you're going to hear in that first 3 seconds. And then you can go ahead and power it on, wait till the machine gets to its full oomph, and then go ahead and feed your pieces through. I'm adjusting the knob to raise and lower the bed until I feel a slight amount of resistance. Better to take a light cut than it is to take a heavy cut. So even if you're unsure, you can just go ahead and lower it until it just sits above where your piece is, and then go ahead and run your piece through. Alright everybody, that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already, and go mill some wood.